Welcome to Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristin Harmel, Kristy Woodson Harvey, and Patti Callahan Henry are 4 longtime friends with more than 70 published books between them. Together, they host Friends and Fiction, with author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, to highlight and support independent bookstores. They discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Friends and Fiction Show. I'm Mary Kay Andrews.
And I'm Patti Callahan Henry.
And this right here is Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories to support indie bookstores, authors, and librarians. Tonight, we are so excited. Can you see how excited I am? I'm jumping up and down. So excited to welcome Laura Dave to discuss her new novel, A Night We Lost Him. The book is set to be released next week on September 17th, and we are so excited to speak to Laura about it.
All the way from Paris. She's
I
coming
know.
all the way from Paris.
Yes.
Okay, but first, we just have a quick reminder to check out all the fun things going on in our Friends and Fiction community at friendsandfiction.com.
There you'll find our show schedule, details on upcoming in-person events, and links to our bookshop.org page, to the Friends and Fiction official book club with Brenda and Lisa, to our merch store and our newsletter sign up. In other words, if you want to know more about Friends and Fiction, and there is a lot to find out, be sure to check out friendsandfiction.com.
And I and Mary Kay are both here to really encourage you to go check out our Substack. So Substack is way more than a newsletter, and it is called Friends and Fiction Endless Stories. And that's what it is, endless stories. You can read all our free weekly posts.
Really kind of sums it up.
Freakly too. Free weekly posts on the Substack website or app. And if you subscribe, boom, they just land in your inbox so you never miss anything. And it's so much more, like I said, than a newsletter. For paid subscribers, we have this incredible extra content, including deeper dives with our weekly show guests like Laura, plus monthly roundtable discussions. For example, Kristin did a 4-parter with 13 authors on World War II fiction. Kristy and Mary Kay did one with Ellen Hilderbrand, Nancy Thayer, and Brooklyn Foster on beach reads. And Ron and I are just rounding out one where we talk to librarians. And you're going to be so fascinated. You think you know what librarians do? You don't. So it costs about $5 a month or $50 a year for the paid subscription. And you can always start free and upgrade.
And it's so worth it. Okay. Now let's welcome our friend Laura Dave. Laura is a #1 New York Times bestselling author of The Last Thing He Told Me, 800 Grapes, and several other novels.
Her novels have been published in 38 languages, probably more by now, and have been chosen by Reese Witherspoon's Book Club, Indie Next, Book of the Month Club, Best of Amazon, and Best of Apple. Best.
The Last Thing He Told Me was chosen as the Goodreads Mystery and Thriller of the Year for 2021. 6 of Laura's novels have also been optioned for film and television. And The Last Thing He Told Me is now a series on Apple TV, co-created by Laura and starring Jennifer Garner.
Can we say we're a little pea green about that one? I know. But it's really good too. And I'm a huge Jennifer Garner fan.
I am too.
And a Laura Dave fan. In her new novel, The Night We Lost Him, estranged siblings discover their father has been keeping a secret for over 50 years. One that may or may not have been fatal. The novel is set to be released on September 17th.
Sean, can you bring Laura on?
Hi, Laura.
Hi, it's so great to see both of you.
You too. How do you say hello in French?
Bonjour.
Bonjour. Oh, I know that. I've been to Paris. Bonjour, Laura.
It's sort of wild to be here. I'm actually researching the sequel to The Last Thing He Told Me. So we're doing a little work trip. But I dragged the family along. So we're making sure to enjoy ourselves as well.
That's good.
So fun.
Well, Laura, we're so happy to have you on Friends in Fiction. Let's start with the question we always ask other authors. Now, The Night We Lost Him, the flap copy describes this novel as an epic love story wrapped in a riveting mystery. So, what is the book about? And then, what's it really about?
Yes, that's a great question. For me, this book is about what it's about is two estranged siblings who join forces in order to figure out what really happened to their father after his death is ruled accidental, but they think something else is going on. And they sort of have to put their differences aside in order to uncover the mystery, which is all wrapped up in a 50-year secret they knew nothing about. So that's what the plot is about and what it's really about, and what it was about for me, and what started the journey of the book is the question of what does it mean to be the witness to someone's life? To really know that person and be known by that person above all else. And the answer to that question ties directly into the mystery of why the father was killed.
Which is, it's almost like we talked, like it weaves directly into the question I'm going to ask, because I think what's fascinating is part of the mystery is kind of the chameleon-like quality of Liam, Nora's father.
Yes.
And he is this millionaire real estate tycoon who is different things to different people, right? So if you line up all these people and have them describe him, you're going to get different stories. But often Nora and her half-brother Sam, the estranged siblings who are coming together, will turn and say to each other, well, you know, Dad. But the irony of that is that they don't really know him all that well, but they're always saying it to each other. And could you talk about the process of creating Liam from all these points of view? Did you have any real life inspiration for him? Tell us about that.
Well, I did have some real life inspiration, just like with the last thing he told me that was inspired by Enron. The Night We Lost Him was inspired by a real life true crime event, which I can tell you both when we're done with this, but I can't say here just because
it's a spoiler. Yeah.
It will, people who know, then they're going to know something that they can't know.
Okay.
But there was I'll just say loosely that a publishing magnate who died, the way he died and how he died, he was the first inspiration for Liam. And then I started studying a lot of men who, like everyone from Sackler, the opioid crisis, to Sumner Redstone, to all these men who found themselves sort of at the top of empires. And what I found really fascinating was one common thread among them is that even if they had many families that they compartmentalized, once you were sort of in their inner circle, they kind of kept you there, even though they wouldn't let you know the other people in the inner circle. And I thought, what an interesting way to live your life, where you are compartmentalized in that way. So that was sort of my jumping off point for thinking about him and trying to understand him. And then I became really, for me, what defined his life is something that defines many people's lives, which is the idea of who we love in public versus who we love in private.
Oh, wow.
And what happens if those two things don't line up? For a lot of us, for most of us, they do line up, and that makes your life a lot easier. But for certain people, when it doesn't line up, who's seeing the real you? And what barriers are you putting around that relationship to keep it sacred, that disallows anyone else from seeing the real you? You don't even realize the steps you're taking to make that happen. And unfortunately, as much as he loved his children, they were a byproduct of the people who didn't get to know him because he was protecting that relationship.
Yeah. He was a good silo builder, wasn't he?
He really was. I love that. You just said that so succinctly and perfectly. He was a silo builder. That was what he was.
I wonder if that was a product of the fact that he was a builder. His career was in building things.
Developing things. Yeah.
Yes. I think it was part of it. I mean, I think certainly he was, the first silo that he built was really from himself.
Right.
He really made a distinction between who he decided he was, which he didn't like, and who he wanted to become. So the first thing he did, this is a man who grew up in Midwood, Brooklyn, and who spent, from the time he was sort of coming into his own consciousness, trying to escape that person and become someone else. So he tried to sort of stamp his foot down and say, this is who I used to be, and silo that from who he decided he wanted to be.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that kind of flows into my question, which is, I think Patti and I were both awed by the way you seemingly effortlessly. Now, since we've done this, we know it is so not effortless, but the way you wove the plot backwards and forward more than 50 years at some point for what's pretty much a shocking conclusion, you seem to peel back those layers so artfully. Now, we've read that you often don't know how your stories will end.
Yes.
How do you do this? Please give us a tutorial.
Have a pen. Ready to go.
As both of you know, with this, writing is rewriting. And so for me, that first question of what does it mean to be the witness to someone's life, all I knew going in was that Nora was an architect, and in some ways that she didn't quite yet see, mirrored her father. And so I knew that her father died, and I knew that using architecture as the way in, her brother was going to approach her and say, Dad's death is not what you think, is not what we're being told. And that was all I knew. So I knew that first scene. I knew those first 10 pages. I often think about E.L. Doctorow has this great quote that writing a novel is like driving a car at night. You can only see as far out as your headlights. And whenever I feel stuck, I just think I only need to see as far out as my headlights. So I sort of know the next thing that's going to happen. And here, because I was telling this 50-year story, this love story, I did know something, which is who he loved. So that was a piece of it that I knew. I did not know, though, how that was going to tie in. And I didn't know. I just knew that that's what he was loyal to, because that journey was going to mirror Nora's journey of figuring out what she was loyal to and who was going to be the witness to her life.
I did not see it coming.
Oh, I really appreciate that. I was really, my editor, I don't know I'm really interested actually what your guys' process is with your editor, but I will not show her anything until, that first draft is for me. And then the second draft is also for me. She probably doesn't get it until 5 drafts in, because I don't want to give it to her until I am certain about the story I want to tell. And then she gets to sort of get in there with me and, hopefully bring it all to a better place. But do you guys share with your editors earlier than that?
I do. I'm a failed newspaper reporter.
Mm-hmm.
And so I need instant feedback. I need instant gratification. So I'm sending chunks of the manuscript to my editor as I'm going. And the unspoken agreement we have is that she just says either keep going, or she can say, and has at some point saying, this sucks. No. Or no, that, I don't think that's
She has never said this sucks. I'm going to just say she's never said. Kathy reads between the lines. What she says is maybe we should go in a new direction.
Yes. That's interesting.
Because I'm a book girl, or I have been.
Yes.
And so I can't get all the way down the road in the dark with, just my cell phone light and figure out, oh my God, I'm lost. And so I need that lighthouse. And my agent, same thing. But now, Patti, you have a very different process.
I do. And I would, you were telling the doctor thing and I went like that because I know about the headlights. And I was laughing, thinking to myself, the problem comes when the car shuts off and you lose your headlights, right? Like, and you're halfway down a dark, scary road with no headlights. But I've done it both ways, Laura. I've done it both ways. I've said, you've got to let me finish it because I don't know the ending. I've handed it in and called them and told them I have to change the ending, which happened in The Secret Book of Flora Lee. And then I've been like,
that's so amazing.
I had we were this close to arts and I said,
Yeah.
I have a different
Slow,
energy.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, it all depends on the book. It
Yeah.
all, but I swear I want to keep going round about this, but we have so much more to talk about with your book.
Okay.
So let's talk about the setting, because Mary
Yes.
Kay and I talk about setting a lot. We both use some of the similar settings, how important they are to a book,
Mhm.
how the best books are those where if you took the story out of this setting, it wouldn't be the same story. Like,
Oh,
that's how
I love
important
that.
the setting
Yeah.
has to be. Now, part of this book is set in Brooklyn and the Hudson Valley, but it is Windbreak that I'm a
Mhm.
tiny bit obsessed with. And I know his name is Liam Noonan, but I kept picturing
Yeah.
Liam Neeson. So it is this beloved cliffside sanctuary on the central California coast. And I could really see it, and I want to go visit. So, how important is setting to you in a novel like this? How did you choose it? And was Windbreak based on a real place, please? That I
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
it
Okay.
is. Setting is so important to me. I absolutely love what you just said about
Okay.
how it would change the entire, that if you change a setting, it would change the entire story. For me, so much begins with understanding how someone relates to their home. And I like to put homes and settings in towns on the edge of the world in some way,
Oh, I
because
love
I
that.
think it requires something different of its inhabitants. And I love narratively what that does for a story. And so I think that for me, this does take place in Carpinteria. That's where his home Windbreak is. And I went and did a lot of studying of Padero Lane, where his house is. And there is at Loon Point, there's something called the Sanctuary at Loon Point. And that is a piece of property that I base this on. In real life, the house that is there is much grander than the house I put there. But I loved imagining that the sanctuary, what it was like before there was this sort of grand house there, and someone staying very loyal, having an allegiance to keeping it that way. So that is a real place. And for me, the fact that he thought it was going to be one thing, it was going to be an escape, and it actually was the thing that most reminded him of who he's always been.
Mm.
To go back to the idea of siloing, he couldn't silo himself there. It's the one place he couldn't, the place he thought he would. And I imagine it like a time capsule. Everything in the book centers around that place for me.
Mm.
You know, your protagonist, Nora, is a neuroarchitect.
Yes.
And it makes me think about the protagonist of the last thing he told me, who is a wood turner. And it seems to me that, and then I know 800 Grapes was
Mhm.
about winemaking, right?
Yes.
So is that something that you like to do? I mean, we had never heard of a neuroarchitect.
Mhm.
Is that something you like to do? Think really deeply about who the character is, the essence of who they are and what they do. And then, so how did you go about crafting Nora and her profession?
So it's so important to me. So I don't write sort of mysteries or thrillers that hinge on violence or revenge, or sort of the things that sometimes propel a story in that way. And so for me, it's always about someone seeing something, like a normal person seeing something from a different angle.
Right.
And I like to sort of infuse into the character a profession that off the bat makes them sort of spin on an axis that's a little bit to the side, which explains why they're the person that was able to uncover what other people might have missed, how they get to become the hero of their own lives in that way. And a neuroarchitect, I sort of stumbled into. I knew she was an architect that sort of based her building on not sort of structural magnificence, but on how do I create spaces that are healing emotionally and physically for people.
Mm.
But I did not know that that was a real thing. I thought I was imagining something. And then a dear friend of mine recommended a movie called a documentary called I can't believe I don't remember the name because it was so critically important. My Father, the Architect. I'm going to have to look it up and tell you guys what the name is. But it was about Louis Kahn, his son. I credit it in the back of the book. Made a movie about not really knowing his father, who had several kids and several marriages. And he created the Salk Institute. And when I started, and I had that on my desk early on, and I realized when I was doing more research on him that he was credited as, and that was sort of a space that was all about healing and that he created. And My Architect, that was the name of the movie.
Okay.
I'm gonna put that to jet lag that I forgot that. But he and at some point I read an article that said he's sort of the forefather of neuroarchitecture. So I thought, what's neuroarchitecture? And then I read about it. I'm like, oh my God, that's what I've been writing toward this whole time without even knowing it. And so then I hit pause. I turned off the headlights, Patti, as you might say. And I did a whole bunch of research about neuroarchitecture. I spoke with people who focus on neuroarchitecture, some really talented architects. And I went back and looked at Nora through that light, through the specificity of what they taught me that I was leaning into anyway.
Fascinating. I love the way that jobs, I never give them a job that doesn't influence their decisions or how they're thinking about it. And when Mary Kay and I were reading the book, we were texting, what a cool job. Who knew about neuroarchitects? Okay, speaking of neuroarchitects, Nora says, when she talks about being one, and I loved this, she says, for her, a project starts with a central image. So it made me think about you as a writer, Laura. How does a project start for you?
It starts emotionally with that first question, always. So for the last thing he told me as an example, the question is, can we ever know the people we love? And with The Night We Lost Him, the question was, what does it mean to be the witness to someone's life? And I always there is sort of almost an image that gets attached to that for me, like almost a picture or a thought. And then I go about trying to answer it. But more than like a photograph per se, it's that question that everything circles around. And then I sort of move into imagery from there.
I always say it starts with a curiosity, which it sounds the same, which is like, I'm curious what it would mean if you thought you knew the person you loved, but you didn't. Right?
Yes.
And then it's almost like a magnet. It starts attracting all these characters and ideas and professions and settings. And I wish it was easier than that, but that's the way it goes.
It's funny that you said that about an image, though, also because I don't know if you guys ever read, but Michael Chabon wrote this amazing essay called Wrecked, which I highly recommend. After he wrote Mysteries of Pittsburgh, and that was so successful, he found a postcard, and it was that image. He became like he was subsumed by it, and he spent years writing a book based on that image, and ultimately he threw it out. And the book, and wrote Wonder Boys, but he couldn't seem to let go of the image, and it almost held him prisoner. It's this wonderful essay about feeling stuck after success and imagery. So,
kind of look that up as soon as we hang up. Ron Rash, I've done a number of things with him. He's a beautiful Southern writer. He's also a poet. Teaches Appalachian, but he says every single book he's ever written has started with an image. But for me, Mary Kay, is it more for you like an image or a question?
It depends on the project. The book I'm working on now definitely started with a portrait.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that I was fascinated with. But it seems to me, Laura, that so much of what you do is intuition.
I think that's true. I I really sort of feel something. I feel like this idea that I want to explore, and I sort of move through it intuitively. I mean, to be fair, that is not a process that is A to B. It's
No,
more like A to D to G to H to, oh
exactly.
my God, I just threw out 70,000 words. But I really believe, and one of the first things I felt strongly, when I wrote my first book, I was feeling very proud of myself. I was in graduate school. I had published a couple of uh, short stories in literary magazines. It's funny when you said the portrait, one of which was my first story that I published. I was so excited, was based on a portrait I saw at the National Art Gallery in London. And I was like, oh, I have this novel. And I moved back to New York and I spilled water on my computer and I lost the entire thing. And so
Talk about wrecked.
exactly. And
Oh my
that's,
gosh.
I started working in journalism and I was tutoring private school kids and I was anything and everything to keep my mornings free to try to rewrite that book. But what I actually think ultimately it taught me, one, is that book was probably terrible. And two, that what makes us writers, I really believe, is as much what we throw out as what we keep. And it, from an early moment, the flip side of that intuition is I'm never precious about anything.
Yeah.
I will throw out 50,000 words and not think about it because I think it leads us to where we're supposed to go.
Yeah, Patti had that exact. Well, it wasn't a computer.
It's pretty much exact. I'm think that feeling of
What happened?
it's gone, and yeah.
Did
Well,
you
no,
throw,
she just decided that it didn't
you
work.
just decided. Oh,
I
okay.
decided a
Yes.
year's worth of work, but Mary Kay and I talked about literally exactly what you said. Are you listening to our phone calls? Because it's this idea of nothing is wasted, and that the things that you cut are just as important as the things you keep. And I think emerging writers often think that all the words we wrote are the words in the book, and
Yes.
there's hundreds of thousand words on the cutting floor, but all of them are kind of thrumming and shimmering underneath the words we do write. So
I totally agree. And I also think things come back. And you might have a wood turner that you throw away in one book and she comes back as a 14-year-old girl in another book. And there's only a few lines of her dialogue, maybe, but those lines are who that 14-year-old is. That's her essence. And if you hadn't done that work, you wouldn't find your way to the other work. So it's, it's all a process in that way.
I love it.
Yeah. Now we understand that you co-exec produced the Apple TV series For the Last Thing He Told Me.
Yes.
Could you talk about the process of bringing that story to the screen? And then, of course, since you did share with us why you're in Paris, is it true there's going to be a second season? We really need some hints.
Yes, there is going to be
for us.
Yes, there is going to be a second season. I am actually writing the sequel to the novel, which will be coming out next fall, and then the season 2 will follow shortly after. So, so that's exciting. I really didn't think it was going to be. I thought I was done after the book. I had no intention. For me, that was always a call and an answer. The call being at the beginning of the book, you hear the first thing Hannah says is Bailey, like calling out to her stepdaughter. And then the answer is mom. So everything was a movement toward the end. Once I found it, and there was a million other ends before I found that. And I thought that was the end. And then, sort of the response to that book and so many people having questions about what happened to them, I realized I had all sorts of answers about what happened to them that I hadn't anticipated ever putting on the page. And I sort of sat down and thought, okay, I think there's another book here. But so that's sort of what's going on with that and with the second season. In terms of the show, it was just sort of such a gift. I've had other things optioned, so I'm very familiar with things getting optioned and not sort of going anywhere. And so it was just this really beautiful thing of all sorts of wonderful people, for anything to be made into a show or a movie, have to decide that they're devoted to this and they're going to help make this happen. And sort of the fairy godmother of this show was really Jennifer Garner, who just was very connected to the book and very connected to Hannah Hall. And it was just really so wonderful to watch her become that character, you know, to embrace her the way she did.
Yeah. Yeah, because once I watched it, I listened to the audio on book tour. And then once I saw it, I was like, nobody but Jennifer Garner could have been Hannah.
She really, I feel that way too. I really do. And, you know, we have these wonderful moments on set. Like I remember one day, her wardrobe woman, the woman that works with her with wardrobe, is wonderful. Costume designer, Susie DeSanto, who's been with her on like almost all her projects. And we were in the wardrobe room and Susie was showing her something, giving her options. And, Jen picked this purple robe and she's like, well, because I think purple is Hannah's favorite color. And I said, you know, I can really imagine that. She's like, it was in the book. And she she would remember things that I didn't even remember. You know, it was really this wonderful thing of someone caring so much about those characters. And, you know, especially season 2 is probably going to be quite different because I'm writing the sequel almost simultaneously. I can't be involved in the show because will mess me up, you know, mentally. Yeah. So I sort of sat down with the writers and said, this is the broad strokes of what I think is the book. But as you know, it could go a million different directions. So they're sort of going to take the ball and run with it over there. But I feel like Jen is the true north of making sure that ship sails.
Now, will Bailey be back? The actress that played Bailey?
Yes, she will be back. Owen will be back. The wonderful Nikolai will be back. And David Morse, who plays Nicholas, plays a very important role in the sequel of the book. And so he will be back as well.
Cannot
wait.
Did
it take you a little bit to come up with the story? Like, because you've written another book in between. So you must have been like really thinking about it.
Yes. So yes and no, because of the 70,000 words that I threw out of that first book, Owen had a whole story of everything he had been doing over the last 5 years. And that was sort of the new book's really about salvation. And, that was the jumping off point for me. Like what was so crazy is I realized exactly where that new story would start and where it would go. But I gave myself some time and I wrote the first 100 pages before I talked to anyone about it to make sure that I thought there was really a story there. And it sort of just came out. Like, you know, some books are labors of love and some books are just plain labor. But this one was just, it just sort of flowed.
Oh, that's good to know. So I love looking at themes in a book, or the themes I think rise up, because you don't probably heading going, I want, you know, but a theme in the book that had us thinking is when you talk about this, it's Nora speaking, the uncomfortable work that comes with knowing that change means showing up for yourself in a new way. So I'm wondering if that has affected the course of your career or surprises along the way, the idea that you have to know what change means and then show up for yourself.
I think that is so profound. What you just, I mean,
you wrote it, my friend.
No, but the way I don't think I wrote that in the book.
Yes.
It's like that purple robe.
I do not. I think, but the way you just said it sounded different to me. So I think the way you
I pulled it straight out of the book. Or even find the page number, but yeah.
Do you ever feel that way as writers, that sometimes you don't feel something when you write it, but then someone else can talk and you hear it in a different way?
Yeah.
I think you have to figure out how to show up for. I really do not remember writing that, so I think maybe from the copy you have to the final copy, it's maybe not there. But
either way, it's a profound realization by Nora, and I wonder if it's affected the way you've showed up in different ways for your work, because your career is, you know.
I think that in so many ways, especially as women, we're asked to become the hero of our lives on a daily basis. and move into new realities and figure out how to be there for our family and be there in crisis. And, in some ways, going back to the beginning of what we were talking about, I think Liam Neeson is able to compartmentalize in the way that he did because he is a man.
Yeah.
I don't think women can compartmentalize in that way. Our lives don't allow it. There's a reason that sometimes you find out that men have secret families, but women you never find out have secret families.
Yeah.
How is that even possible, right? Like,
it shouldn't even be possible. So I think that sometimes it becomes, really hard to imagine a new life for yourself, to sort of step out of your comfort. One of my favorite books, that Ann Tyler wrote a book, Ladder of Years. Do you guys remember that book?
Mm-hmm.
In which there's a character who just walks away from her life. It's a woman who just is on the beach and she sees her
I've heard
family.
about this and keeps walking.
Just walks away. And I think about that because in some ways, to show up for change, you have to be saying goodbye to who you decided you were, which is such a hard and important thing to figure out how to do.
Yeah.
It's true.
And that, this is all like a river. It's just flowing.
Yeah.
In the book, you say, one of your characters says, you move toward your destiny or away from it. Do you believe that?
I 100% believe that. I think that I always think about this story that a friend told me. She told me this decades ago now, that shortly before she got married, she saw the man that she thought was the love of her life getting into a taxi. And she knew that if she stopped him, that everything in her life would be different. And if she didn't stop him, everything would be different. And I think about that all the time because in some ways that feels like a sliding doors moment. But I actually think in a larger way, we are always deciding whether to show up for our authentic self or whether to convince ourselves that we don't have to because it's hard work. Yeah. And so that's what I think about when I think about destiny.
Now, how does that apply to your career as an author, Laura?
For me, I always knew I wanted to be a writer, always. Mm-hmm. And the first thing was I was not going to get a 9-to-5 job. I was going to have 13 jobs so that I could keep my mornings free to write. It's always about figuring out what you need to do to write the next book in a way that you can be proud of. And I think part of that is sometimes it's doing the hard thing that you did, Patti, and saying, I need a new ending, or throwing out a year's worth of work.
Oh, knife in the gut. Yeah.
That is an authentic way to exist as a writer. You could have turned that in. You could have kept the old ending and they would have gone to press because you're who you are. And you did the hard thing to show up for yourself and believe in yourself as a writer. That's the work.
That's the work.
All right, Laura. Well, gosh, there's so much more we want to ask, and we will ask you some more stuff. But if you will stick around, we have a few quick reminders for our listeners and viewers out there.
Amazing.
I can tell you I'm going to be watching this again because you said some really profound things about life, the way our life and work knit together to get these stories. But for all of you watching and listening, we want to encourage you to rush out right now at this second and buy your copies of The Night We Lost Him. And the perfect place to do that is the Friends and Fiction Shop on bookshop.org. And here's why. You get it at a discount. You help to fund our show. You help Laura, and you support independent booksellers nationwide, which is one of the reasons we started this show in the first place.
Yeah. We also want to remind everybody to follow us on Instagram and join our Facebook group, which is nearly 250,000 members strong. When you visit friendsandfiction.com, you can stay up to date about everything we've got going on. And you can sign up for Friends and Fiction Endless Stories, our Substack, which is chock full of bonus content,
including Laura's Q&A. So Laura, I want you to tell everyone out there how to connect with you while the book is out. Not that they're going to run to Paris and find you, but like online. Not what hotel you're staying at. Don't that kind of find you, but what Where are you most active on social media? Are you going to be on book tour, your website, things like that?
Yes. So I'm most active on social media on Instagram. My handle is Laura Dave Author. And I'm actually doing a really long book tour, which for me is brand new. For the last thing he told me, it was during sort of the height of COVID. I did a couple of virtual events. So please come out and see me. The events are on my Instagram page. I don't know if you guys feel this way, but I'm always like, is anyone going to show up?
Oh my gosh.
I get nervous every
The
time.
worst is the hour before when
Oh
you're
my
getting
gosh.
ready and you're at the bookstore and you see the chairs.
Yes.
Nobody's in the chairs yet. Like,
Yes. Oh, it's real. That's very real.
It's real.
So yes, so I will be doing that book tour for most of September. I will be going to wonderful independent bookstore to independent bookstore.
That's great. Well, yeah, you all go out there. If you're watching this, make sure you check out where Laura's going to be. Go to her events and tell her that you heard about it on Friends in Fiction. But in the meantime, Laura, thanks so much for talking to us about the night we lost him and all the other things we touched on today. It was such a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much for being with us on Friends in Fiction.
Well, thank you. And if I can just be a little bit of a fangirl for a minute, I have so many of both of your books. So I feel this was, if you didn't know how much I wanted to be chatting with you today, you can know it because even with only a couple days in Paris, I wanted to, this was more important to me. So I really, really appreciate it.
That's so dear of you to say.
And it's love right back at you.
Mhm.
From the very first time, I have your book all the way back to 800 Grapes. And it's a keeper, meaning some books you read and then eventually donate to the library. I still have it. So Laura, right back at you. All right, everyone, be sure to tune in next week when all four of us will be together live to welcome Jodi Picoult to discuss her new novel, The Friends in Fiction Pick for August by Any Other Name. It is so fascinating. She supposes that Shakespeare did not write his 38 sonnets, plays, and poems. And I know it's really fascinating. So that share will air live on the Facebook page and YouTube channel on Wednesday, September 18th at 7 p.m. And it will be on our podcast on the 20th.
Thanks to everybody for being with us today. We'll see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you for tuning in. You can join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here.